Hello and welcome to this week's MVC Baseball Rawlings First Pitch segment. I'm your host, Joe Healy, and today I'm very excited to be joined by Illinois State head baseball coach Steve Holm, coming off of his team's series win over UIC. First off, Coach, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start with Tanner Perry's effort on Sunday for you guys. Complete game shutout, gave up 2 hits. Have to imagine that's the best you've seen from him in a Redbirds uniform.
Yeah, I mean, it was outstanding. He's been on a good little run here the last couple. He got touched up. I think Bradley knocked him out in the first, and ever since then, he's kind of regrouped very well. But yeah, by far, that was the best Tanner Perry I've ever seen. I mean, it was dialed in from the get-go, and normally he's a pretty high strikeout guy. So, getting to a complete game is going to be tough if you strike that many guys out. And kind of luckily for us, he only struck out 7. So we had some first pitch, balls in play that got some outs, and he only gave up the 2 hits. So there was minimal base runners, but ultimately it was the best he's ever been for us.
Yeah, there's something particular too about it being a low scoring game where like every one of those innings was stressful. It's different when it's a CG like in an 8-0 game, right? So like the idea that he stayed locked in for 9 innings is particularly impressive.
Yeah, and I mean they had a runner at third with 1 out in the ninth. We had the infield in, and he punched a guy out, and then to get the infield back, and then we ended up punching the last guy out too. So ultimately, there was very few stress-free pitches thrown in that game for him. We didn't score a run, I think, till the fifth, and we couldn't muster up any runs either. So the wind was blowing a little bit across, so a couple balls that we hit into that wind just went nowhere, and it was one of those days. But ultimately, yeah, there was a lot of stress on each one of those throws, and he did fantastic.
After your team lost the opener to the Flames, what was the key behind bouncing back and winning those final two to get the series?
We hadn't played well in conference for a couple weekends. We got swept by Bradley, and then we went 1-2, and we lost a 1-run ball game at Southern, and then we lost a 1-run ball game on Sunday against Missouri State here at home to go 1-2 in that series. And that it's on everybody's mind. It's not like something you can hide from. Everyone's aware that, like where the season is, where the standings are, and everything. And I thought the big key was Tyrell Chadwick just came out, and he kind of put us on his back and kept them at bay, and we were able to score some runs, and we hit the ball pretty well on Saturday. And I know it looks like you have 9 hits, but it was one of those days that you could have had 15 the way that we swung the bats, and they made a couple diving plays in the outfield. But I think when your team needs somebody, and you have that kind of that stopper, and Tyrell was that guy, and then that gave us the confidence the next day, and basically Tanner Perry kind of said, "Let's see what we can do here," and he kind of one upped him a little bit.
How gratifying is it as a coaching staff to be able to win a series in which in all 3 games you scored under your average this year for run scoring, and just showing the ability to win games, when the offense maybe isn't finding the holes in the lineup, given that your offense tends to be where your bread is buttered.
Yeah, I mean, our team has a hint of Jekyll and Hyde. We can there's weekends that we just basically won with our offense. You just showed up, and they were just going to do it for you. And it's kind of good to see that this weekend. I think we scored 10 runs on the weekend, and the pitchers are, they can do it too. And there's been some weekends where the pitchers have been really good, and some weekends when the hitters have been really good. And we'd like to see these next couple weekends where everyone's there together, same time.
That would be nice. I'm told that's usually what works, Coach.
Yeah,
But
yeah, you're a smart guy.
you're currently in a your team is currently in a 3-way tie for fourth in the conference, and that's an important spot because fourth is a team that doesn't have to play Tuesday of tournament week; they get to play Wednesday.
Right.
What's the biggest advantage to potentially playing Wednesday versus Tuesday?
I think you save a starter. Obviously, if you win the tournament, nobody has 7 8 starters to be using. So ultimately, you get into that Wednesday, and this week being a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you don't want to be bouncing your guy back all the way to Tuesday either. So one more day of rest. Obviously, to win the tournament, the least amount of pitching you can use and the most amount of hitting you can use is what does it for you. So that's got to be the biggest advantage there.
Do you, with this last series being Thursday, Friday, Saturday, have you been consistent with kind of how you and your staff have approached the pitching, or does it kind of change year by year based on what you have on the mound?
I think it changes the personnel. Like Tyrell Chadwick is probably the strongest athlete that we've ever had on the mound, and that includes Brent Hedrick and and Jeff Lingard are pitching the big leagues for us. But so getting guys like him to move up a day you're less concerned about than certain other guys, and some guys bounce back really well. And you always have pitchers that 3 or 4 days later after their start, they're like, gosh, it's still, not quite back where I want it. Tyrell's a guy that, he may tell you he could pitch 2 days later, like he does bounce back really well. And, so sometimes you have that and I think it changes your perspective as a coach. And Tanner Perry's one of those guys, he bounces back pretty well as well. So it just, the personnel changes every year and, how their bodies are. And their bodies also are not the same now that they were in April, or May and June and back in February. It always changes, as the season goes on.
Do you worry at all this time of year as we head into the last regular season series? Do you ever worry about the look ahead to the tournament because it's so close, and especially now with it being at home?
Um, I don't, but I think our players do. I honestly don't even watch the scoreboard until this weekend's over because it doesn't matter. It's not like, oh, so and so lost, so we should try harder today. I don't think that is a good recipe. But and that goes back to my playing days, like, and when you're playing in the big leagues, they put the scoreboard up there on the outfield wall, and you have guys looking at it, and some of our coaches are like, what are you guys looking at? Like, there's a game right here, And for that, that's kind of my perspective is like I literally don't look until the weekend's over, but I don't think that's easy to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, we are talking about human beings after all, like it's
Yeah.
just kind of human nature to be curious about what else is going on that might affect you. Um, Indiana State this coming weekend. What are your early thoughts on that series and what's going to be important for you guys to get a series win?
I still think we need our offense to click. Obviously scoring 10 runs on the weekend was not ideal, but our pitching has been, significantly better the last couple weekends. But I think just rolling into the tournament with the right guys hitting, and making sure that that's where you want to be. I thought this weekend Noah Smith came in because Grant Mastros, slipped out there in the outfield on Friday night. And Noah Smith was, I think, 5 for 8, 5 for 9 or something for us. So, getting a good like shot in the arm like that really helps us. And I think it takes some pressure off some of the other guys. So I think that's what we're looking for is, can we get some consistency out of that lineup and then keep the arms where they're at?
My last thing for you, I got a little fill in the blank here for you, Coach.
Can't wait.
If we as Illinois State, if we're going to make a deep run in the tournament, we have to blank.
We have to be able to take over games with our offense. I don't think anybody has, 8, 9, 10 guys in the bullpen that are going to win you a tournament necessarily. So with that, you see the way these tournaments go, you need right-handed power and you need left-handed power, and we do have both of those things. And the deeper you get in the tournament, obviously the quality of arm, starts to lower a little bit because most guys have used their top arms, to get to that point. And at that point, that's when the power really comes into play. So I think that's what's going to have to happen for us to make that deep run is you're going to have, the big boys show up and start taking over some games. And that also allows you to not necessarily go all 9 innings. I thought
Yeah.
Evansville did a great job of that, partly, you know, because of us. They last year they knocked us out in a 10-run game and they saved 2 innings here,
Yeah.
saved an inning over there. And at the end of the thing, you're lucky that you maybe you've saved 3 or 4 innings that you need in that last game.
Of course, the tournament coming up here in a little more than a week. Steve Holm is himself literally hosting the tournament. He will be at the front gate handing out gift bags to everyone
Yes.
who walks in. That you heard it here first, folks. But in all
Hey,
seriousness, in all seriousness, looking forward to the MVC tournament here in a little more than a week. Going to be a lot of fun. First off, Coach, appreciate you joining us today, and good luck the rest of the way.
thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And that's going to do it for this week's edition of MVC Baseball Rawlings First Pitch. Join us every week from now until the MVC tournament. And by that, I mean that's it. This is the last one. So we're about to get to the MVC tournament. That'll be at Duffy Bass Field on the campus of Illinois State. We finished interviewing this season each and every baseball coach in the Missouri Valley Conference. Hopefully, that has prepared you for what should be a really fun week at Duffy Bass Field. Thanks for watching. and we'll talk to you later.